Then we headed up to Namibia, which was the next place, and by then Hugh decided he needed to get back home, and he left, and so that left Matt and Patricia and me. He said, okay, next place to stop is St. Helena, where Napoleon was exiled the second time and died there. And so it's an interesting place because there is no breakwater, and the only port you can only go in calm weather. And so we did go in, and we were allowed to stop, and we had a great time there. There are water taxis because there's no place to take your dinghy to the jetty, and there's like a goalpost with ropes hanging down with knots in it. So when the water taxi goes up, you grab one of those and swing yourself up on the dock, on the concrete dock. And, Patricia found that very exciting.
Challenging. If you don't quite make it, you fall back in the boat and
Hopefully
hit your head
yeah.
on the motor casing, which is a box, a wooden box that hides out this motor on the water taxi.
So after Patricia got that experience, he wouldn't take anybody else in the boat but her because it was too scary for the others.
Well, there was no help to get across from the boat to land.
And then they had this, they used to ship guano out of there for fertilizer, so way up on the top of a cliff they had a station where they collect it, and they had an old railroad, very narrow gauge railroad track that went up in a little hand car they'd bring it up. And so now there's steps you can go up and the rails you can hold on to. So Hugh and Matt and I hiked up there, and the locals told us when they used to go to school up there and they'd put their hands on the rail and their ankles down below them and slide down the tracks. We didn't try it. That's what they did.
Good.
Patricia tried it.
Didn't try it.
Yeah. So the next leg was from there across the South Atlantic, which has a good reputation for being nice sailing most of the time. And we didn't have any place to stop. We were headed to Brazil.
Well, there was one little problem. Our water maker didn't work and the parts didn't show up in St. Helena. Is that correct?
Yeah, they didn't have an airport at that time. They had a Royal Mail ship twice a month from Cape Town to London and back. And there's no way to get parts. So I said, well, for many centuries the sailors sailed without water makers. And so let's go find all the plastic jugs we can find and fill them up. And the water came from a reservoir down these rusty pipes, so there was a kind of rusty water. And I said, well, that's what it is. And so, it's okay. Like if we're cooking, we can use salt water and just mix it a little fresh and wash the dishes in the
Salt
rusty water, or in the salt water, yeah. And she says, what about a shower? There's no problem. You sit in the cockpit and we throw a bucket of salt water on you. She didn't think that was a good idea.
It was almost a month, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. I don't remember. Several weeks.
Several weeks. It was only 4 in a month.
Okay.
It was a long trip, some of which was enjoyable. Just a lot of little things like Matthew had pulled together photographs of people who drink the salt water, for example. Very awful. And also for people who don't drink the salt water, also awful. And so this was to discourage me, I guess, from using much of the fresh water. And it did.
We actually had water left over when we got there. Yeah. So then we get to Rio, and that was a wonderful place. We had a great time there. And at that point, Maddie decided to stay there a while and go to school. And we headed up, just the two of us, really the first time since the first few weeks in Australia when it's just the two of us on the boat, no crew.
Right.
So we're heading up the coast of Brazil, which is really interesting, lots of fun places to stop and visit. And one place, again, it's called another Broglio's Archipelago, Open Your Eyes, and it's a reserve for the humpback whales that come up from the Southern Ocean in calf. So there's whales all around us. It was wonderful, but we'd see these just a whale tail sticking out of the water. And you see whale, at first I thought, what's that, the navigation mark? No, that's a whale's tail. And we'd go by it and it would be still there. And there were some naturalists who spoke enough English we could talk to them on the island. I said, what is that? He said, oh, that's a mother whale nursing. Now, I assume they're right, but anyway. And then we go to this little place called Morro de Sao Paulo, which is a tiny little vacation town where you can only get by boat or by float plane. And it's a very old town from Portuguese Empire days, and they have a little water fountain where people get their water, and there's a whale's tail sticking up out of it. So anyway, from there we went to Bahia de Salvador de Bahia, and we met some friends, Arthur and Vera, and then we went on up to Fortaleza on the north coast of Brazil. And where we're trying to get to is Trinidad, and we were hoping to spend, which we did, spend a season in the Caribbean, a convenient place for friends to visit and meet us and spend a week on the boat or whatever. And so, according to all the grid charts, which I had by now and that sort of thing, the doldrums were supposed to be further north, but in fact they moved. So we found ourselves with no wind for several days, and not enough fuel to motor all the way to Trinidad. And I'm sitting there thinking, if I jump in the water with the painter in my teeth, can I swim and pull the boat?
He was about that desperate and unhappy with the situation.
You can't fish because if you're not underway, that doesn't work. You have to be going about 5 knots. And so finally, we still had the Inmarsat, and it comes alive saying,
Danger,
danger, danger, danger, tropical wave headed for you. And I said, what is a tropical wave? What's that? Well, we found out. And so
Yeah.
about 12 hours later, we look up, and there's this black cloud all across the horizon, and lightning and wind is heading towards us, hit us, ripped our mainsail in two, and so we just rolled in most of the gentle. Now we could sail, which was great. And
Yeah. It's a lot of wind, though.
a lot of wind, and we sailed on and made it in between the other boats. We get between Trinidad and Tobago, and then got into what's called the Gulf of Paria, through the Boca del Dragão in the mouth of the dragon, and dropped the anchor. So I'm just taking a nap. Next day we'll go check in to the authorities there, and the local yachties, and a lot of people spend the cyclone season. There's lots of yachts there from the U.S. and America. What were you out in that weather for? Because we had no choice. I said, well, nobody goes out. Well, I said, don't you know what that is? It's not a water wave, it's a pressure wave. And they form off the west coast of Africa. They march across the Atlantic, and every named storm, every tropical cyclone or tropical storm starts in one of these things. They don't all become one of those, but we don't go out in those. So we stayed there for one season. Friends came to visit. We had a wonderful time in the Caribbean. We got up as far as St. Thomas and St. Croix, and then back to the other islands and back to Trinidad. And then the next year we planned, and we did. The next year was the longest, I guess, well, maybe after the first year, the longest time continuously sailing. I mean, stopping place to place, but mostly underway.
Yeah.
Most of cruising, you're just staying in places and maybe going to the next anchorage and spending most of your time just that. But this was different. We had 10,000 miles in 1 year, nautical miles. We're ready to leave Trinidad, and our friend who lives across the street here kept an eye on her car, starting it now and then, and he wanted to sail with us. Said, okay, well, meet us in Trinidad, and you can ride with us as far as Bonaire, and then other people are going to join us. So he did, and we're getting ready to leave, and the Trinidad Coast Guard says, we're going to have a meeting for the yachts. Okay. So, well, we've had some problems. There's a gas pumping platform out there, and these guys hang out on the platform, and the yachts that go by, they rob them. And the German boat had all their electronics stolen, and they had to go and try to get all new stuff in when they got to Grenada. So, yeah. And they said, so keep in touch with us on the radio and let us know if you have problems. I said, yeah, right. You're going to come in your inflatable out there and help us out when we're 100 miles out. How are you going to do that? So I said, that's not going to happen. So no, we're not going to talk to him on the radio. And we'll leave at dusk and travel in the dark. And we turned off all our lights, and I even put a black plastic trash bag over the helm light so they wouldn't see that. But we have to sail, and it's a moon at night, and they can see our sail. And so we can see the lights of the gas platform off in the distance, but the wind is pushing us closer and closer to it. And then about 2 a.m, there's this light at the boat. I don't know why they showed a light, but they left the gas platform heading out to us. It's at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't think they're coming for coffee. So, shit, what do we do now? I said, well, okay, take the sail down and start the motor and just head right into the waves, thinking that maybe a small boat would have problems with that. And luckily he did, because after a while he turned around and went back. So anyway, that was our experience with Pirates of the Caribbean. And then we evaded them and sailed on to Bonaire, which is a wonderful place for snorkeling and diving. It's just amazing. People go there just for that. They fly there and go there just to do that. And so you anchor out and you just step off the back of the boat in this beautiful clear water, and there's all kinds of fish. I can't say enough good things about it. And then from there we went on to Panama and stayed a while there, had some other friends visit us in the San Blas Islands and enjoyed that, and then on through the canal, which was an interesting experience, really fun. It was great. And then we had it planned, because I knew from there we're going all the way to Hawaii that year. So we got a long way to go. And another friend we met on the beach in Aruba joined us to sail to Tahiti. And so that was the nicest. Well, we went to the Galapagos first, spent several weeks there. That was great. And then from there to Marquesas was 3,000 miles. We're in the Southeast Trades on a port tack. We're sailing with just the head sail, because I say I don't want to deal with accidental jibes. We never had to change the sail. Just maybe roll it in and out for 3,000 miles. Wonderful sailing, catching fish, beautiful weather, and no storms, no nothing, all the way to the Marquesas. The best sail we ever had. Yeah. And then, so we stopped in the Marquesas and spent several weeks and some really fun stories and adventures, swimming with sharks and things. And then we went on from there to the Tuamotus and stopped at Rangiroa, which is a wonderful little atoll with a pearl farm in it and everything. We had a fun time there.
It was fascinating to see the way they grow cultured pearls.
Yeah.
Black ones, white ones, pink ones.
And then we went to Tahiti, and our friend Ed, we told him he had to leave because our friends Danny and Susan were joining us from Seattle. We spent several weeks in the Society Islands. Hugh and Eddie joined us in Bora Bora, which Michener said was the most beautiful island in the Pacific. And we kind of see why you say that. If you fly in with the airplane, you see this lagoon with this turquoise water from the white coral sand. It's just amazing.
If you fly into
Bora Bora.
Bora Bora.
Yeah. So
it's
anyway.
Incredible.
Yeah, so they stayed with us for several weeks and did some snorkeling, and then they left.
It was really nice.
Yeah.
I had decided by the time we got to the South Pacific that this is really fun. Up until that time, I really had hesitancy. That's a mild term for what I had.
So in any case,
fear.
She said she liked it by now so much. Can't we leave the boat in Tahiti? I said, well, actually, you get 3 months to stay there, and then you have to leave, or you have to import the boat, which is very expensive, and then you have to leave it there. And then what are you going to fly back and forth when there's a storm or something? No, I can't do that. Got to take it home so we can keep an eye on it. So now there was a Russian couple that we had met in St. Thomas, and
she came around because she admired the Caliber boat.
Right, she'd read about Calibers. They wanted to buy their own boat. Could we come and see your boat? And I said, yeah, sure. And he said, well, where are you going next? Well, could we sail with you? We'd like to have that experience. And I said, okay, meet us in Raiatea and sail to Hawaii. And so they met us there, and Patricia went home for some other things back in Virginia.
Yeah.
And so we took off, and several other boats are leaving at the same time. We're in a radio net. And I'm talking on the radio in the morning, and the Russian guy comes in and says, "John, yes, your glue is gone." "What? Your glue is gone?" "What?" The glue had ripped out of the head sail, the Genoa. So, shit. So I had another Genoa, smaller one aboard, but the thing had wrapped, the halyard had wrapped around the forestay, and I couldn't get the thing down. So all I could do is what's called a Spanish reef. You take the the spinnaker halyard and just pass it around and around and around and gather the thing up. And then said, okay, we're only a couple hundred miles out. We just got to go back to port and take that one down and put the other sail on. And that was a good thing because the Russian lady really wasn't enjoying the sailing. She really wasn't. So I said, okay, that's good. And Patricia came back and said, looks like you're going to have to sail to Hawaii with me. I said, really? Okay. So we took off again. And this time I had learned about when you cross the doldrums, motor back to the east. So you make sure you have a good wind angle to get. Hawaii is almost directly north of Tahiti, so you have to go back to the east if you can to get a reach to get back to Hawaii. So we're just coming out of the doldrums and everything's great. And we got about 800 more miles to go to Hawaii. And so Patricia says, it's in the middle of the day, I'll go make some lunch. That's great, I'll put up the sails, turn off the motor. This is great, we love this, I'm looking up, oh my gosh. One of the shrouds is starting to unravel where it comes out of the spreader and then comes back to support the mast. That's not good.
Right.
If that goes, then the next, it's like dominoes, the next one goes and then the mast. So I take the spinnaker halyard and pass it under the spreader and then back to a winch so I can tighten it up and try to help support it. And I also had, when I changed the standing rigging in Cape Town, I had kept one of each cable so I could replace one if I needed to. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go up the mast. I used climbing gear, Jumars, ascenders to get up there, but I'm swinging around like I'm on a tether ball. And Patricia's down there. Come down now. If you die, I'm going to divorce you. So,
it wasn't exactly like that.
That's the way I remember it. So I came down and I said, okay. And I talked to some other boats in our cruising net that said, yeah, that happened to them coming from Mexico to the Marquesas. They lost some of their shrouds and they talked to the Coast Guard and they had a freighter drop them some jerry cans of diesel tied together. They float and they could pick them up and then they could continue. So, well, maybe we could get them to do that because we don't have enough fuel to motor all the way there, and I'm afraid to sail with this situation. And so she says, well, call the Coast Guard. And I don't want to get on the radio and everybody hears what's happening. And I'll call them on the iridium phone. So I called the Coast Guard and they said, well, okay, stay in touch. And then just a few hours later, they say, look, we want you to get on this conference call. What? Yeah, there's a sail training ship out of the U.S., Woods Hole, Massachusetts, a brigantine, and they're in your vicinity, and we asked them to assist you. Really? I said, well, why can't we just wait? Well, if you lose your mast, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Let's just...
That's true.
So, okay. So I talked to the skipper and he said, oh, we got to go backwards and they'll come and meet us at the coordinates the next morning. It's not a lot of wind, but pretty big waves. So what do you want us to do? Well, if you could send somebody over to help us get this one shroud replaced, that'd be good. So an inflatable comes over, a young woman driving the inflatable.
It's a big inflatable.
A big inflatable, and an older guy is their head mechanic, and then the young guy is the rigger. He's this guy. And said, okay, what's the deal? And they haul him up the mast, they crank him up with the winch, and he gets up there and says, "Get back down, I'm seasick." So, but he finally went back up there again and got the shroud replaced. And what else can we do? Could you need some fuel? I said, well, it'd be nice if we had to use it. Well, empty your jerry cans into your tank and then give us the jerry cans and we'll go fill them and bring them back. I said, wow, that's great. So she said, I'll make them some brownies while they're gone.
What did you
You
say?
made some brownies for them.
Well, yeah.
So they came back and they gave us the full jerry cans, which we tied on, and said, well, can we pay you for that? And I said, no, it's a tax deductible 501 not-for-profit thing, and here's the information, you can make a donation. So
Donation.
I'd be happy to. And then we get to Honolulu, and then a few weeks later I see this ship in the harbor there. I said, honey, that's the same ship. No, it isn't. I said, I think it is. Let's go see. And it was. And so, can we go and do a tour of the ship? And all the paid customers saying, that was so exciting. We got to watch you guys get rescued. And so
Furthermore.
yeah, that was the most exciting part of our trip. So I asked the captain, how were the brownies? He said, what brownies? I didn't get any.
Oh, well.
So anyway, we got there for Thanksgiving to Hawaii, and then we obviously we don't want to sail back to the Pacific Northwest in the winter, so we left the boat until the next July. That was what we planned to bring the boat back. Now, in March of that year is when the
It's a huge tsunami in Japan.
the tsunami that destroyed the nuclear power plant, and the waves came all the way across to Hawaii, and smaller, not like that one, but big enough waves that the dock where we left our boat, these were floating docks, but they weren't on pilings. They had chains fastening the weights on the seafloor. The chain snapped, and the docks broke apart. And so the friend that was keeping an eye on the boat says, you better come, I don't know where your boat is. Great. A lot of boats literally disappeared, were lost. But ours was damaged, but tied up to a short piece of dock with another boat, another guy that we knew. And so I found a place to take the boat, a place called Barber Point. There's a marina there, very expensive, $800 a month, but where am I going to go? I'm not going to be there very many months. And I found a place to get the boat hauled out so I could check the bottom and make sure everything was okay. And what was damaged, it backed into something, so antennas on the stern rail were broken, and I had to replace those, and I had to replace the radar because I needed to replace it anyway. And get the boat ready for the final trip home, which was in July, and some other boats we met there. We were all traveling together on the radio again. And now we're going across the North Pacific High, which is this big place where there's no wind, the wind circles around it. If you want to sail around it, you have to go all the way almost to the Aleutians and then come back around it. So, well, on the grid charts we could watch and see where we got enough fuel to motor across it here and then get the westerlies to take us back home. And we're out there one day, it was really calm, and the same boat that had been tied up to that same piece of dock, he's out there in an island packet, and he's doing the same thing. And he says on the radio, hey, we're close together, let's just get together and take pictures of our boat. I said, okay, fine. And toss him a beer, they toss us some cookies or whatever. And so then we continued on, and some of the other boats were bigger and really in a big hurry to get back, so they'd go further. So they had 50-mile winds and they could sail fast. And no, let's just stay a little further south and have 30-knot winds. And so we sailed, and eventually, but the traffic had changed so much when I left Strait of Juan de Fuca in 2000 to head down to Portland and start the trip. I saw one freighter off Cape Flattery, nothing else. Now, there was so much traffic, and you had to check in with the Canadian radio, and they said, talk to this freighter on this channel, and you can tell him which way you're going to go, and he'll go a different way. So you're like, jeez. But anyway, we finally get
10 years almost.
Yeah, 10 years circumnavigation, and from 2001 to 2011. I guess my advice was, sooner or later you will be in a storm, even though you try to pick your time and everything, sooner or later you will be. And I highly recommend having a sea anchor for sure. To my knowledge, only one boat was ever lost that was lying to a sea anchor, and that's because it didn't have a float on it that pulled the bow under. A drogue is a little different. Other people say they'll just run downwind with their generals, but I know of boats that have been lost that way because they broach. So I would say be prepared for heavy weather, and I think a sea anchor is a really great idea.
So this is sort of advice I would give to someone who wants to go cruising. A person needs to learn the partner that you're cruising with really well, and figure out what the differences are in personality and the differences in just daily living. Because once you're on once you're crossing an ocean on a boat, there's no place to get off the boat, walk around the block, and let steam off, if you have a disagreement. So I would say in terms of just actually being happy on the boat, that would be the number one mission.
So my advice is do it while you can. It's an amazing experience. I mean, I learned so much about myself. And one of my favorite quotes, the Odyssey, it says, it took him 10 years to get back to Ithaca. It said, hope that the way is long. It's not the goal, the destination is not the goal, it's getting there. And all the adventures and all you learn along the way. I think that sums it up. It was worthwhile. I mean, I don't regret it at all. Yeah, I could have stayed home and earned a lot more money and lived in a whatever bigger house, drive a new car every year, a bigger pension. But why? I'd rather have these memories, the friends I made, the things I learned. And Patricia. And I talked her into joining me. Amazing. She still wonders why. The one thing we agree on. Yeah.
So one last question. Would you do it again?
At this age, no. At your age, yeah.
Possibly.